Hello and welcome to Show and Tell. I'm your host, Conley Zani. This week on Show and Tell, I have special guest Lisa Smith Molinari. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You are author of The Meat and Potatoes of Life, and you're here to tell us a little bit about what it means to be an author, tips and tricks on how to publish a book, and that kind of thing, right?
Yes.
Well, before we dive into that, the Show and Tell piece, tell me a little bit about how this all started for you.
Yes, it's interesting how it started. So my husband, I'm a military spouse. My husband was active duty for 28 years. And back in 2007, 2008, he was on a year-long deployment. And I'm at home with 3 kids.
Where's home?
At the time, it was Virginia Beach, Virginia. That's where we were stationed. A huge dog, 110-pound Labradoodle, and a house with, an aging house with repairs and running to scout meetings and this and that and swim team lessons and all this. And I was super stressed. And at some point, it's almost like an exercise in mindfulness. I just started writing things. And I had a yellow legal pad, and I would sit there and I would write things. And eventually, they became essays. And I was writing like kind of humor-based things about marriage and family and parenting, military life, slice of life type stuff. And then my husband ended up coming home. I survived the deployment, and intact. And
That's a good word.
Yes, we went on to Germany, and I'm sitting in Germany in our stairwell housing. The military folks watching this know what I'm talking about. And I thought, I should just put these essays out there and see if I could get something published. So I had no idea what I was doing. I'm online back in the earlier internet days, trying to find email addresses of editors and submission guidelines, even though I didn't really know what those were.
Kind of winging it.
I was totally winging it. Like I say, by the seat of my double-digit size pants, I always say that. And I ended up submitting to a bunch of newspapers. So one of the newspapers, out of the blue, without me even knowing it, I got no indication that they were going to publish it. I all of a sudden got a call from my uncle in Washington, D.C., and he said, I think I'm reading something that you wrote. And I said,
You're kidding.
No. And so it's behind me. I have the first thing I ever published was in the Washington Post. I mean, crazy, right? So, and that was...
Bravo.
Yes,
that's
right?
amazing.
It was all downhill from there. No, I'm just kidding. No, I thought, wow, I could have something published in the Washington Post. And I kind of went nuts and thought, I should be a writer now. I think I'm going to be a writer. And I thought, I could write columns. I think I could write columns. I could be a humor columnist. I'm going to be the next Irma Bombeck. And little did I know, a lot of people think that, and they really just don't know what they're doing. And I didn't know what I was doing. But I started to just teach myself. I bought a book called The Art of Column Writing by Suzette Martinez-Standring. I read that book from cover to cover. I kept it on my nightstand. And I just started learning how you write columns, how you submit columns, what the word counts should be, what people get paid for them. Little did I know I was never going to get paid a lot, which is true. And so I ended up getting it published by different newspapers, military-based newspapers, community newspapers, my hometown newspaper. And I got anything from $5 a column, no kidding, from the Towanda Press in Pennsylvania. They were very loyal to me, but only $5 a column, to nothing, where people would promise to pay me. They never paid me.
Wow.
Yes, so I just kept doing it, and it's almost like I went backwards. I went from getting something published in a really high-end publication to then learning how I'm supposed to get something published, right? And so I went back and covered all the ground that I didn't know when I got something published. And we ended up moving here after a couple more moves. And in it was 2013, and I was still writing my column and publishing it weekly, every week, churning out these stories for years, every single week, about my family, about military life. And somewhere in there I decided, I think I want to write a book. And so and in the meantime, I also got my column in Stars and Stripes, which is the newspaper for the U.S. Armed Forces. That's like the most legit publication that would agree to publish my column. They still publish it every week, and so I'm still writing for them.
Wow.
And I self-syndicate to some other newspapers. So I decided I would write a book. I joined a writer's group, and I just started churning away on ideas. How can I take my stories and put them into like a chronological story about our family's life? And that eventually became the book, which is The Meat and Potatoes of Life, my true litcom. So it's written kind of like in episodes, like a sitcom. but it covers everything from marriage all the way to what became temporarily empty nest, and then kids move back in, and we finally have empty nest back again. But it covers sort of the span of my family's life, and it's sort of this book about getting lost in modern minutia and just modern life and parenting and family, and how you sort through it all and make meaning out of all that madness. So that's what the book was about, but that's how I got there. It was a long road, and it's a long journey. So I'm very proud of it. May 2020 is when I published the book.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, so the meat and potatoes of life.
Yes.
I can't wait to hear all the nuts and bolts, the tips and tricks that you have to share with everybody. So I'm going to turn it over to you now and let you do your show and tell.
Great.
Awesome.
Okay, so now that we're in the show and tell part of this, we're going to do a really brief show, because my show today is basically what we were talking about before, and that is my book. I published this book in May of 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. And, like I said before, I'm nobody special. I'm just somebody who dreamed of doing this, and I made it happen. And so that's really the show part of my presentation. The next part is going to be the tell. And the tell is more important, because my journey to publishing a book is really a pretty standard story. And so what the tell part of this is going to be, I'm going to tell other people who also have a dream of writing and publishing a book how they might do it. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the really bad news, because there is really bad news. There's really good news too, though. That's the good news. There is good news. And then I'm going to give 3 practical tips that I kind of learned along the way that I can pass along, that I would pass along to anyone who is interested in writing a book. So how did I do this, and how do we do this? First, we have to go through the bad news. So brace yourselves. This is ugly, it's no fun, and it hurts. And what I'm going to tell you is that if you've dreamt of writing and publishing your own book, you are not alone. In fact, 80% of Americans today really believe that they are going to write and publish a book. So 80% with today's population, that means you're in a group of about 268 million people in the country. And so the fact of the matter is, of course, all those people are never going to write and publish a book. What is true is that most people start a manuscript and they never finish it. That's the vast majority. Of those people who do write a manuscript and complete it, the vast majority of those people will never publish it into a book. The other bad news here, and all this is based on articles by the New York Times, Publishers Weekly, the Authors Guild. The other bad news is that we are in a 10-year, the lowest profits that authors have made in 10 years. Okay, there's another little tidbit of bad news. Don't worry, it's going to end soon. Just brace yourselves, I'm almost done. And the last part is that that the New York Times has said that anyone who decides they're going to be an author better have a second income. So, and if I relied on the royalties from my book to live, I would be living in a cardboard box over a heating grate right now. So that's the bad news. But next we're going to go into the good news, and I'm telling you there is a lot of good news. Today is a great time to publish books because there are more books being published today than any time in history. And there's still a huge demand for books. The pandemic didn't really slow that down. In fact, people read more books during the pandemic. There are millions and millions of print books today and millions of ebooks today and digital print books. So I'm a big fan even of Audible books. There's some books that go straight into audiobooks. So there are people, I'm consuming more books than I ever have before because of all the different formats and the ease of being able to get them. We no longer have to go down to the library or to the big bookstore. We can find them online quickly, get them in print, get them in audio, get them in ebooks. So that's really good news. The other good news is that you no longer have to be J.K. Rowling to get a publisher to publish your book. There are so many different types of publishing today. Self-publishing, there's traditional publishing, but with indie publishers, so small publishers, micro publishers, medium-sized publishers. There is something that some people call hybrid publishing, but it's basically like self-publishing where the author might pay a little bit to have a publisher do certain things for them that they aren't willing to do or don't want to do. There's a lot of different ways that you can publish a book today. And so that's really good news for people who have that dream. It's accessible for more than just the most famous authors today. And so in conclusion of the good news is that if you have a good idea and you're a good writer, you can publish a book. You can do it. So there's the good news and the bad news. And next I'm going to go into the 3 tips, the 3 practical tips, if you want to complete this goal. And the first tip is kind of obvious. Hello, write. You need to write, okay? I hate to break that to you, but if you want to write a book, you're going to have to write, okay? And a lot of people just have like an idea in their head about, oh, I have this idea for this great fiction novel or whatever, or I have this great idea for a memoir, and what the tone of my memoir would be, or what the story would be, I can tell. Well, without really sitting down and going through the practice of writing, and without putting your work out there for critique and for possible publishing or having other eyes look at it, your idea isn't likely to go anywhere. Or someday you might self-publish a book and it doesn't get in front of a lot of people because it's just not a quality product. So you have to have a good idea. You have to be a good writer to do this. And so my advice is sit down, make yourself a writing schedule, just start writing things. As I said before, I just started writing essays to deal with stress when my husband was deployed. And that eventually led to me publishing the article in the Washington Post. I started a blog, I started a column, and through the course of all this, I would put things out to all kinds of publications. Here's an op-ed that I wrote. Write op-eds, write letters to the editor, write anything that would get your work out there and seen by an editor is always helpful because they can critique you and tell you what you've done. Have it be seen by friends. Get into anthologies, get into magazines. And what you do is you reach out to, or you look up magazines. This is one of the things that is a strategy that, I was a military spouse, so I would reach out to military publications like this one, Addie's magazine. And they need content, periodicals, newspapers, books or magazines like this that publish every month. They need material. So they're looking for people to pitch to them and send them material. And as long as you're not looking to be paid an arm and a leg, or if you're willing to do it for free, which isn't always a good idea, but it is when you're starting out, start throwing stuff out there. Look at the submission guidelines. That's what they're called, submission guidelines. Look up the editors, look up the submission guidelines, look up the email that you need to send it to, look up contests. Do whatever you can to get your writing done and get it out there. There are a lot of authors that we know of today are prolific writers, and what people don't know is that they went through a lot before they got to the point where they published their first book. Dr. Seuss's first book was rejected 27 times. J.K. Rowling's first Harry Potter was rejected, I think, 13 times. She published all of her rejection letters on Twitter. So these very famous authors, in some cases, put out hundreds of things and are rejected. And you have to really, buckle under, do the writing, get yourself in front of other people, and just write. So number 1 is just write. Number 2, take the leap. Make yourself a writer. Now that you're writing, now you're a writer. So what do writers do? They join writers groups. This is always the piece of advice that I give to anyone that wants to write, whether it's a book or become a columnist or anything like that. Like I was a columnist. Join a writers group. The reason I say that is because not only there may be people in the writers group that are a completely different genre than you. It doesn't matter. You get good at critiquing their work because in a writers group you normally read your work aloud or you exchange work and you have to critique other people's work. And then you get good at taking critique, which is really important. If you can't take criticism, you're never going to get an agent. An agent isn't completely necessary, but if you want an agent, you're never going to get one if you can't take critique. Publishers, once they publish your work or when they get a hold of your work, will likely critique it or ask you to change things. These are the kind of things being in a writer's group will get you used to, and it will give you experience in that, in critiquing your own work. So, and just to show you how successful being in a writer's group can be, I joined a writer's group here in Newport, the Newport Roundtable, and these are just a couple of the books by some of the authors that were in the group with me. We all joined and we would just exchange, here's a chapter of my book. I get to do this week. Check it out. What do you think? And we critiqued these works before they went out. So we were like the first editors on some of these books. And those people that wrote those books and a group of others that were in the group critiqued all of this book before it went to before my manuscript went to the publisher. Another group that I joined was the National Society of Newspaper Columnists, but there are all kinds of groups out there you can join. There are things online you can join. There's National Novel Writing Month. Look that up online. It's usually November. These are people who online commit to a certain word count per week, and where they can write a novel in a month. So you talk about lighting a fire under you and getting you to write and start a writing schedule, that'll do it. But I joined the National Society of Newspaper Columnists. I joined it because I read this book when I wanted to be a columnist. This was the book that I said, oh, well, that'll just tell me what I need to know. I didn't know that I needed to know a lot more, but this is what started me off. And this woman that wrote this book, Suzette Martinez-Standring, is in the National Society of Newspaper Columnists. And I thought, well, I need to join that group. So when we moved back from Germany, I joined the group, and I met Suzette. We're friends to this day. But all these other people, all these books here on the table, I won't hold up each one of them, were fellow writers in the National Society of Newspaper Columnists that I wrote with. And that we all published books. We all would review each other's books. It's really, really useful to learn. And then later, once you do write a book, it's really useful to be in a group like that because you exchange favors for each other. You write blurbs for each other's books. You put them out on the internet for each other. You do a little marketing for each other. So join groups, even if you're a complete novice. That's what I did, is I just put myself out there. I did everything by the seat of my double-digit sized pants, okay? And I didn't have a mentor that was carrying me along through the way. Another thing that you can try to get published in after you've taken the leap that's before you actually write the book is anthologies. Anthologies, here are 4 anthologies that I published a column or two, or one of my essays in each of them, and then I have another one coming out soon. People who edit anthologies need content. So Chicken Soup for the Soul, they publish so many of these books every year, the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. If you look them up online, you can see what they'll put out a call for a certain type of essay, and I answered the call to 2 of those and got into both of them. And that's kind of a nice feather in your cap to have one of these anthologies, because it says, my book is worthy, or my writing is worthy of a book. Anthologies is a great thing to get into, as well as contests, and all that. So the third tip that I would have is, it's just a saying, and it's, there is no crying in publishing. All right, you have to become intimately familiar with rejection. And, like I said, join writers groups, put your work out there. Through the course of that, you are going to be rejected. And when you finally do write your manuscript, you are potentially going to face rejection because you're either going to pitch it to an editor, you're going to pitch it to a publisher, you're going to possibly, look into some avenues to get an editor if you're self-publishing, and those people are going to tell you, okay, this isn't quite right. And it's like daggers and slings, right? I mean, oh no, there's this great saying that is, lots of people talk about it in publishing, and it's that you must murder your darlings. And what that means is that this work that you put together, it is your baby, right? Well, you're going to be told at least once during the process, sorry, we don't like that chapter, you're going to have to kill it. And to you, it's so meaningful. What? You can't read this story without that. But once you do it, there is this freeing feeling that you have, that you accept that other people's eyes are going to see that it's not just your eyes and your perception, it's other people. And it gives you this feeling of sort of, when I went through the editing process, I actually, my editor is one of my friends and a fellow author, Terry Barnes. She went through my book and we went around in circles many times, and we had it was a great process. And I had to get rid of several stories, but I also rewrote a couple that Terry allowed me to rewrite and said, I'll consider them after you rewrite them, and she accepted them after I rewrote them. So it just is like this fine tuning that really does make the work better, and it feels good in the end. You feel like you have this really good product in the end. So you have to get used to rejection. Like I said, so many authors, Stephen King, J.K. Rowling, lots of others. Even The Diary of Anne Frank was initially rejected because the publisher felt that the author, Anne Frank, did not have any special perception beyond the curious. Okay, I mean, mind-blowing, right? So you have to keep at it. You have to have persistence. So in conclusion, at the beginning of this, I told everybody that you need two things to write a book, and that is a good idea, and you have to be good at writing. But there is a third thing, and that third thing is that you have to be persistent and just keep at it, keep working, keep writing. Don't give up, because like I said, 80% of Americans, over 265 million people, think that they are going to write and publish a book, but it's very few that actually do. So if you want to be one of those few, you have to have persistence. So there you go. That's my tell, and I'm sticking to it.
Oh, wow. That was really, really incredible. Lisa, I'm really amazed at everything you shared with us. And I've got to tell you, I had a really strong reaction to that whole concept of murdering your darlings.
Murder your darlings.
I'm left going, I don't know if I could do that.
Yeah.
Because it seems like you put so much of yourself into the work. And then, you're like, you got to be open to the criticism. You've got to throw some things out. And I mean, wow, that is hard. Were there elements of the meat and potatoes of life that you can remember really struggling, throwing out?
Yeah.
Or changing?
At the time, yes. At the time, and like I said earlier, when the editing process was done, I felt really good about it. And I actually had fun with the editing process, which a lot of people see it as really painful, because it is all about going in and criticizing someone else criticizing what you've done and changing it, in addition to correcting things and getting it really ship shape. But that's also part of the editing process, is style editing and content editing and that kind of thing. So that can be really difficult. But
you grew to like it, it sounds like. Like you've got some armor.
Because I saw that once you let go, it can make it better. And some things are worth fighting for. And I did, I did rewrite some things. And my editor was so great. Terry Barnes was great. She would explain to me sort of like what her opinion was, why she wouldn't just take something. She would explain why. And then I would say, oh, well, what if I change it and I could fix that why, and I could provide the why, And so she did let me do that. But in the end, she would stand her ground on certain things. And later, I don't really regret any of those. It was interesting, though. There were certain stories I had to take out that were based on the publisher's strategy with regard to how she was going to sell the book. And she wanted the book, even though my publisher is a publisher that only works with authors that are or books that are by, for, and about military people, military-connected people. She wanted this book to have a greater appeal than just military. So I wrote some stories in there, because I'm a military spouse, that were specific to military.
Sure. Yeah.
Like there was one that was about when we move out of places, when we move out of one place and have to move to another, we give our food away. And it becomes like gifts, like, hey, I really like you, and here's my used bottle of pancake syrup, you know, and you're like, oh, thank you, you know, and how you have to read into it, and these can be really meaningful gifts, like, oh my God, you gave me a jar of capers that I'll never use, you know, but
That's
you
so
see
funny.
sort of, it's this habit in military life, and you see the meaning in it, and to me, I loved this piece, and I wanted military people to see it, you know, and to read it, and I knew they would laugh. I knew they would think it was funny.
And they would get it.
Right.
They would know you.
Right.
Yes.
But it ended up getting axed, and I didn't like that. But what I've done is that I'm using all those stories in another way. I've written them all into columns, but I'm also putting together maybe another work that will be really specific military stories.
Yeah. So is that what's next for you?
Well, you know, I write this column every week, so the next is really just keeping at that. I mean, that's a lot of work in and of itself. But as I write my column every week, I also see that, you know, a lot of people would ask me like, oh, well, what's your next book going to be about? And I'm like, oh my God, don't stress me out. I just got one out. Okay, that was hard enough.
You'll be back once you do another book, and you can talk about what you've learned from there. Yeah.
Yes, right. You know, so it would stress me out, but at the same time, because I write every week for my column, and I can see that I could do this again. I could do it again, and maybe with a different style, and maybe I have something in me that's just for the military community. Yeah. So that's what I've been learning, and but it is important to murder your darlings, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yes. And my other takeaway was just this whole concept of like believing in yourself. Mm-hmm. You know, you said be persistent. Like you have to dig deep and be okay with that. Like I'm so impressed, like listening to you about your transitions from like accepting the feedback and the criticism, and you keep producing work, and
you know, and it's hard for writers because writers tend to be people who like to be behind a screen. That it's a layer of protection. In my experience, writers are quirky. They aren't like actors and actresses for the most part. They're quiet, kind of like quirky individuals that like that layer of protection, that I can put my words on paper. I don't have to tell them to someone face to face. So there's a layer of insecurity with people like me. I was class clown in high school because I thought if I was funny, it would make up for what I saw as all my inadequacies, you know. So it's a hard position to be in to write a book because you have to really put yourself out there. You have to market your book. You have to face rejection. You have to, you know, work with editors. There's a lot that goes against the grain that requires a lot of just personal strength and persistence, you know, and hard work.
And I'm just going to add courageous to that. I am so very impressed.
Thank you.
Hey, Lisa, thank you so much for being on the show
Conley.
and sharing everything that you have learned with us. And I hope you'll be back very soon.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thanks. See you next time on Show and Tell.
The Newport Navy Choristers is a local choral group associated with the military that raises money for local 501c3 organizations. If you would like to join us on our journey and learn more about us or become one of our sponsors for a concert to benefit your organization, please visit us at www.newportnavychoristers.org.